Hi, everyone. I am Garen J. Richardson, and I am the Secondary English Language Arts Instructional Specialist for Richmond Public Schools. I am beyond thrilled to work with you today. I miss visiting your schools and seeing your faces, and I really hope that all is well with you. Today, we will review or learn a middle school English lesson. You will need a piece of paper and something to write with. I'm going to ask you questions, and because I can't hear you, I'll need you to write down your responses, and then we'll come back and review your responses during another lesson. This may be new information for some of you, and it may be a review for others, but either way, I'm super excited to get this work done, so let's get started. As you all get your pen and paper, I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's review or learn some new information. Okay, middle school English. We will build bridges for English language arts success today. The objectives for the week: if you are in the 6th grade, it's 6.5. If you are in the 7th grade, it's 7.5. And if you are in the 8th grade, it's 8.5. I want you to take a few moments and just look at the standard that applies to your grade and read it. Okay. The lesson objective for today. Today we will analyze how sentences, chapters, or scenes fit into the overall structure of a text and contribute to the development of the theme. In every story, you'll have characters, and characters are the people or animals who are important to the story. You have a setting, where and when the story takes place. There will always be a plot, and this is what happens in the story. And if you see that diagram at the bottom, that is the plot diagram. Some of you may call it the witch's hat, but either way, it gives the structure of the actual plot, which is right here. The exposition, which introduces the characters and setting. The rise in action. This is where events in which a conflict or a problem is introduced and the problem increases. Remember, a conflict is the same thing as a problem. We have climax. That's at the very top, the most exciting part of the story. This is often the turning point in a story. Then you have the falling action, events that lead to solving the conflict. The action is decreasing. And then we move to the resolution, which is the final outcome or the end. Then there's a theme. This is very important. It's a lesson or message that the author wants the reader to learn. Something is going to be revealed to the reader during your story, and it's going to have a lesson or message embedded. You have to look out for it. Now, think about your favorite story. It could be a book or a movie, because even in a movie, there's a narrative structure embedded. I want you to, on that paper, write down the setting. There may be multiple settings, but write down the setting in your favorite story, your favorite book, or your favorite movie. Tell me, who are the characters in that book, that story, or that movie? Who are the characters? I want you to tell me, what problems do the characters have to solve? Is there a problem in this story? And if there is, write that down. And what do the characters have to do to solve that problem? Now think about how the plot relates to the story's setting and the problem. Think about that plot. And where is the setting with regard to that plot diagram? And where are the problems in that plot diagram? Think about it and just jot it down. Now, in that story, that's your favorite story, there's going to be a theme. If you're able to right now, think about what's the message that was embedded in that story. What did the author want you to learn from that story? Could be that book, that story, or that movie. What was the message, or what was the author getting you to really learn? Okay. So we're going to move over to another activity where we will even more identify theme and plot structure. So while you're at home reading along, I'll read. Stories are made of words. Authors build those words into sentences and paragraphs, and if the story is really long, chapters. This is pretty obvious. What's less obvious is how these parts work together to develop a story's theme, setting, and plot. When you think about how a story's parts work together, you're thinking about the story's structure. I'm going to read that again. When you think about how a story's parts work together, you're thinking about the story's structure. One way to analyze a story structure is ask yourself this question. How does a specific sentence or chapter help develop the story? How does a specific sentence or chapter help to develop this story? You can do something very similar with cartoons. Let's look at this. Read the cartoon below. The two panels are part of a longer story. Ask yourself, what does each panel contribute to the setting and the plot of the longer story? So there's a panel on the left, and then there's a panel on the right. On the left, there are two characters, and on the right, there are two characters. On the left, the character says, "We've been walking for hours. I think we're lost." The other character doesn't make a comment. When we go to the right panel, the same character says, "I think I broke my ankle." And the character beside him thinks, "It's not safe here. Do I leave him and go for help, or do I stay with him until we're both found?" Now, look at that. Look at that cartoon. You have the left panel right here, and then the right panel. And we're going to come down to this chart. And so the chart says, complete the chart. You'll need to analyze each panel and how it contributes to the story. So on the left, the characters are in the forest. The contribution to the plot. The characters have been walking for hours. What else could be a contribution to the plot? Based on the left panel, we know that the characters have been walking for hours because the character says, "We've been walking for hours." But what else is the contribution to the plot on the left panel? The answer is, I think we're lost. So the contribution to the plot, he says, "We've been walking for hours" is one, and "I think we're lost." That's the second one. Now let's look at the right panel and do the same thing. We know that the setting is they are in the forest and it's not safe. How do we know that? There's a thought on the right side and it says, "It's not safe here. Do I leave him and go for help, or do I stay with him until we're both found?" So what is the contribution to the plot in this panel? The boy has broken his ankle because he says, I think I broke my ankle. What else contributes to the plot? There's a problem. What is the problem? What do you think the problem is? The problem is the girl must decide what to do next, and that is the answer to the contribution to the plot. She says, do I leave him and go for help, or do I stay with him until we're both found? That is the problem, and that contributes to the plot. If we look over to the far right, it says contribution to theme. The panels, when taken together, suggest the story's theme is about how people should act when in danger. That is the theme of these two panels, this cartoon. So in this cartoon, we know that we had characters, we have a setting, we have a plot, and then we found that we have a theme. We have all four components in just a cartoon because that's still a story. Let's keep reading. Now, I know that you all are reading at home, and I trust that you are reading at home, but I'm going to read with you. The moose encounter. Jill quietly slipped out of the faded orange tent and into the cool fall air of a Minnesota morning. Though the sun had just begun to rise, she could hear woodland creatures scurrying on the ground. Jill glanced back to make sure her father was still asleep inside. He had told her not to wander around alone, but she had to see a moose. They had been making this camping trip for 3 years now, and though this was supposed to be moose territory, they had yet to actually see one. Jill was determined to change that. Moving swiftly, Jill eventually found herself at the river. She decided to wait, hoping that a moose might come and drink. A short time later, Jill saw a brown animal in the distance, and she held her breath as the creature approached. It was a moose calf. Grinning broadly, Jill began walking toward it, but before she could get very far, a giant female moose appeared out of nowhere and came charging toward her. Petrified, Jill could only stare at the animal as the animal galloped closer and closer. She knew the worst place to be was between a mother animal and her young, especially an animal as massive as a moose. Suddenly, Jill felt herself being yanked out of the moose's path as she held on tightly as her father pulled her behind some trees to hide from the moose's view. They watched as the mother became distracted by her calf, and Jill sighed in relief. Later, when she had finally returned to the safety of the campsite, Jill was full of apologies. I learned my lesson, she vowed to her father. No more moose encounters for me. So we've read the first portion, and we just read the second portion. And I want you to answer this question. It says, which statement best describes the role of the second paragraph on this page in the story's plot? So the second paragraph will be right here. And tell me what is the correct answer. Giving you some time, and the correct answer is D. It explains how Jill's father saves her and sets up the resolution, and we know that the resolution is the end of the story. So now I want us to go back up and do a quick close read activity. Looking at these two chapters, you have one chapter and then you have the second chapter. Paragraph 1 accomplishes many things. It introduces us to Jill and her father. It introduces the setting, a cool fall morning in the Minnesota woods, and it initiates the plot that Jill really wants to see a moose so badly that she will sneak away and disobey her father. This very small portion, just 2 paragraphs, gives us so much information about the story as it builds into the plot. I want us to go down to the chart now and complete it. The chart contains a lot of information about setting and plot. We don't see a lot of information about characters, but we already know that the characters are Jill and her father. I need us to go down to the second block. So we see the first paragraph says it establishes a setting, a fall morning in Minnesota, and the contribution to a plot. It starts the story. Jill wants to see a moose so badly that she disobeys her father to go see one. Now I need us to look at the second paragraph and what is its contribution to a setting and to the plot. So here's the second paragraph right here, moving swiftly. Read it and then tell me how it contributes to the plot. Okay, so we've read that second paragraph. We're going to come down to this chart. And in that second paragraph, what was the contribution to the setting? Is the setting in the same location or is there another setting? Take a second and jot down the answer on your paper. The setting changed. Now Jill is near a river and she's away from the tent. So we learned that in the second paragraph. And the second paragraph also contributes to the plot. I want you to jot down your answer on this paper as well. So in this box, there's a change. Jill gets what she wants. She wanted to see a moose and she got to see one. She snuck away to see it, but she got to see a moose. And so there was a difference in how that contributed to the plot because it led us to see the theme. Who can write down your response to what you think the theme is in the story? What was the message or the meaning that the author was trying to get us to see? Let me know what your thoughts are. And write that down on your paper. Now, many of you may have different responses for a theme because there's really no right or wrong answer. It's truly what you think the message or the meaning is in the story. But if I were to think of a theme, I think it would be more like you shouldn't disobey your parents, you should follow directions, you shouldn't be mischievous, you shouldn't be sneaky, you shouldn't run away and do things that someone has told you not to do because you'll probably need them to save your butt if you get in trouble. That's what I think the theme was for the story. I really look forward to picking this back up during tomorrow's lesson. Until then, you take care, you stay safe, you stay well, and I'll see you later.